I have spent enough time observing how society claims to protect children while doing the opposite. What some call values, others would call carefully crafted tools for humiliation. And they begin early as when a child first expresses a preference, shows a different walk, speaks in a tone someone decides is not appropriate, or dresses in a way that provokes discomfort in adults whose personal comfort has become more sacred than a child's well-being. These reactions are not random. They are not instinctive. They are learned. There is no natural reason why an adult should feel threatened by a child's harmless behavior. No evolutionary basis, no biological defense mechanism, no scientific justification. Only the deep, cold enforcement of social uniformity, enforced not by science, but by fear. And it is always fear disguised as concern, repression disguised as protection, cruelty disguised as morality. I have seen children shamed before they are even old enough to understand what shame is. Laughed at for how they move, corrected for how they speak, disciplined for harmless preferences. All of it justified in the name of upbringing, discipline, tradition, or worse, the so-called preparation for life. But what preparation means in this context is clear. Break them before life does. Mutilate their confidence while they are still young enough to believe that adults know what they are doing. The excuse is always the same. We're preparing them for the real world. But if the real world is so intolerant, then why are we not preparing the world instead? Why are we not fixing what's broken in our systems, our expectations, our institutions? Why must the child change to survive a society that cannot even look at itself? People don't talk about it, but society knows exactly what it's doing. It doesn't make these children better. It doesn't strengthen them. It disfigures them internally, often irreparably. Every time a child is told they're too much of something, too little of something else, too expressive, too gentle, too colorful, too quiet, what is really being said is, you are wrong. And what is the purpose of this message? To erase, to reduce, to reshape the child not in their own form, but into something others are more comfortable looking at. Let me make this clear. A child who wears bright clothes is not a threat. A child who speaks with softness or joy is not a problem. A child who prefers quiet play or has elaborate interests is not defective. None of these things hurt anyone. None of these differences lead to the collapse of civilization. And none of them are contagious. Yet people treat them with more caution than they treat disease. Here's what really happens. Adults who feel unsure of themselves project that insecurity onto children. Adults who have never been allowed to be free target children who are. They do it under the illusion of instruction, but the reality is much uglier. What they're doing is retaliating against difference. Not because it is wrong, but because it reminds them of their own confinement, of everything they were never allowed to be. I am not interested in the excuses of those who say they mean well. Meaning well is not enough. Results matter. And the results are clear. Children who are different are pushed to hide, to doubt, to shrink. And once that begins, it rarely ends. It follows them into adolescence, into adulthood. It informs their relationships, their ambitions, their health. The damage compounds. What started as a comment, a punishment, or a correction becomes a lifetime of self-surveillance. This is not just a parenting issue. This is systemic. Schools participate. Media participates. Faith institutions participate. Entire governments build their platforms around the defense of conformity. All of it in the name of protection. But who exactly is being protected? Not the children. The only ones being protected are the gatekeepers of a fragile order who fear what they cannot control. Let me speak now to one of the biggest lies, that there is a connection between how someone dresses, walks, speaks, or behaves and their sexuality. There is no such connection. None. You cannot determine who someone is attracted to by the way they express themselves. Anyone who claims otherwise is not only ignorant, they are deliberately preserving a falsehood that serves no scientific or moral purpose. This is not just about misunderstanding. It is about power. The power to label. The power to exclude. The power to shame. So when a child walks into a room and someone whispers, he shouldn't walk like that or she shouldn't dress like that, what they are really saying is, I want the world to be predictable. I want people to follow rules I was forced to follow. I want to erase what I don't understand. That has nothing to do with the child. That has everything to do with the adult. No child is born ashamed. No child is born hating themselves. That is taught. Taught by a society more concerned with maintaining its image than with fostering actual growth. Taught by people who confuse discomfort with danger and difference with deviance. It's not ignorance. Let's stop pretending it is. The science exists. The data is there. Specialists have spoken. The research is conclusive. But the truth is, many adults don't want to learn. They don't want to understand. Because understanding would require them to change, to question, to undo decades of complicity. It is easier to claim tradition than to admit error. Easier to suppress a child than to examine one's own fear. And so the trauma continues. A society that produces broken children will one day reap the consequences. And we are. We already are. The anxiety epidemics, the depression, the suicides, the self-harm, the alienation, the rebellion, the social dysfunction. Much of it rooted in the simple, cruel fact that too many people grew up being told they were wrong, for nothing more than existing in a way that made others uncomfortable. What is lost when this happens? Everything. Talents never developed. Passions never pursued. Innovations never created. Love never shared. The world becomes smaller, dimmer, more hostile. The very people who could have changed it are often the ones silenced the most. And for what? For the illusion of order? For a false sense of security? For the fleeting satisfaction of controlling someone more vulnerable than you? That is not protection. That is violence. You do not protect a child by making them ashamed. You do not prepare a child by humiliating them. You do not raise a thriving human being by policing their speech, their play, or their preferences. You raise a thriving child by listening, by encouraging, by allowing them to explore who they are without fear. That is how you raise people who are not only confident, but kind, creative, strong, and capable. And for those who claim that this approach is dangerous, I ask, where is the danger? Show me the data. Show me the harm caused by a child being allowed to express themselves freely. There is none. What you'll find instead is harm caused by suppression, by punishment, by shame. You'll find generations of adults who never recovered from what they were told as children, who still hear those voices in their head, doubting every decision, fearing every deviation from the script. I am tired of watching children be sacrificed on the altar of social conformity. I am tired of the smugness of adults who think their discomfort is more important than a child's development. I am tired of the institutions that claim to care while enforcing silence and compliance. And I am tired of the lies, especially the lie that this is all for the child's own good. No. It's for the adult's own comfort. It's for the preservation of power. It's for the maintenance of control. But it is not for the child. Never was. We are not born to fit into molds. We are born with potential. And it is not up to adults to define what that potential looks like. It is their job to support it, to nourish it, to guide it, not to crush it. When children are allowed to thrive, society thrives. But when children are taught to hide, to conform, to suppress, then society withers. We cannot afford to keep losing our future to the fear and ignorance of the past. When people talk about discipline, they rarely mean self-control or ethical development. What they often mean is obedience, conformity disguised as maturity. And that's where it all begins. The expectation that children obey before they understand, adapt before they explore, and silence themselves before they even find their voice. Not because it helps them grow, but because it makes them easier to manage. We don't raise thinkers. We raise performers. Children quickly learn that their value depends on how well they mirror what adults want to see. Some get very good at it. They learn to suppress what they feel, say what is expected, and never question the rules. These are the children praised for being well-behaved. But what are they really being rewarded for? Disappearing. Meanwhile, those who can't disappear, those whose truth shows in every gesture, are marked as difficult. They are punished not for doing harm, but for existing visibly. And society does not hesitate to remind them, from every angle, that their existence is negotiable. That if they don't change, they will pay a price. Some pay it in silence. Some in isolation. Some by abandoning themselves just to gain temporary approval. And others pay it by being driven out of schools, of homes, of communities. Then the same society that broke them looks on with confusion when those same children grow into adults filled with anger, fear, or despair. Let's not pretend this is accidental. It is systematic. Entire bureaucracies are designed to enforce it. Educational systems that flag behavioral problems when the only issue is nonconformity. Family structures that prioritize the opinions of outsiders over the well-being of their own children. Religious doctrines twisted to condemn difference under the banner of divine order. Politicians who win elections by promising to restore a mythic version of the world where everyone knew their place. All of them united in one mission: to crush variance. And the methods are not subtle. They are taught through punishment, public humiliation, and most effectively, through the withdrawal of love. Children learn early that love has conditions, that it is something to be earned, not received. That approval can vanish with a gesture, a tone, or a preference someone dislikes. And so they shrink, they edit, they retreat. The cost of this retreat is immeasurable. Confidence lost in childhood is rarely recovered. Creativity stifled by ridicule does not easily return. The habit of self-erasure, once learned, becomes a permanent feature of personality. And eventually, society becomes full of adults who cannot tell the difference between what they are and what they were forced to become. These adults then repeat the process. They believe the lies they were taught. They call trauma tradition.
They enforce it on their children.
They confuse rigidity with integrity. They enforce a false binary of right and wrong that has nothing to do with ethics and everything to do with preserving their own comfort. Some even call themselves protectors. They speak about shielding children from confusion or immorality. But what they are actually doing is preventing understanding. Their goal is not protection, it is control. It is easier to suppress the child than to face the complexity of the world. It is easier to punish than to question. It is easier to pathologize than to admit that society is deeply invested in erasing what it cannot define. This erasure is not neutral. It is violent. It is psychological warfare conducted in classrooms, living rooms, playgrounds, and parliaments. And its victims are not only those who are visibly different. Its victims include anyone who might one day become brave enough to step outside the line. Anyone who even considers that there might be another way to exist. Society defends itself by saying, "We all have to follow the same rules." But that is false. The rules do not apply equally. Some are given infinite permission. Others are punished for breathing wrong. The rules are a tool of selective enforcement, designed not to create harmony, but to impose hierarchy. There is nothing moral about this. There is no justice in crushing someone for how they express joy, emotion, or selfhood, especially when that expression harms no one. And we need to stop pretending otherwise. Pretending that these differences are dangerous or contagious is a lie, and a convenient one. It allows people to dismiss what makes them uncomfortable without having to justify their actions with evidence. Because there is no evidence.
None.
The scientific consensus has made it very clear. Personal expression that does not cause harm is not a problem. It never has been. The problem is the reaction, the repression, the ridicule, the attempt to reduce human beings to a template. And let's be clear, these children grow up. They become adults who either recover from their wounds or succumb to them. But those wounds do not vanish. They manifest in the workplace, in relationships, in parenting. They become anxiety, perfectionism, fear of rejection. They become hypervigilance. They become the desperate need to conform even when it kills the spirit. Some break free. But even then, the scars remain. Because they remember the look of disgust on a parent's face, the silence of a teacher,